And so next up, we have Juan, who is a new person. So that's that full circle, Freddie and Juan. So Juan is one of our new, this is one of our new performers, and Freddie will be on tonight. So that's full circle, going from just two people having an idea to us being a full-blown company. So take it away, Juan!
You know, a lot of our adulthood really starts when we're children. For me, I have to look back to where it all began because it's what helped me be the man I am today. The things that I went through in my childhood, sometimes I might say that they're hard. Hell, I grew up in Milpitas in the 80s. It was sunny as hell. You know how beautiful it was out there? Man, I do have some good memories. But there's those things that happen, right? The not wanting to be at home. The not being able to build connections with my family. The friends I've lost. All that stuff really played a part. But it also was the tools that helped me learn how to drop my anger, how to build my patience, how to let those feelings of guilt and anxiety go away. So I just want to start from the beginning. My first memory, I was really young. Hell, I was probably about a year. I couldn't even really tell you because it's really hazy. But it's just two little hands on some 1980s carpet. And as I look up, I just see some Santa Claus looking motherfucker in a lazy boy chair. Never really knew who he was. I just knew he was a stranger, right? That's because in the 80s, people really didn't use car seats like that. And so on some family trip, I reached over and accidentally spilled some 7-Eleven coffee on myself. It must have took my parents about 4 months to get me back. But still, if that taught me anything, it's that no matter what I had, it could be taken away from me. Things like this kind of continue to happen. And they were my first introductions into the system. So I remember walking to my friend's house one day. I had just got back. My brother and I, we were at my mom's friend's house, Eldana. She was a Jehovah's Witness. My mom was a Jehovah's Witness, and so birthdays, holidays, hell, any day was just a regular day, right? I still deal with that today. But we had to spend time with some of the children there, right? And so I was like about 7 years old. And there's this other little kid, speaks Spanish. I mean, my parents, they always told me that I was un americano and that I was supposed to speak English and not Spanish, right? Even though all my mom spoke was Spanglish. But, you know, we're just shooting the crap or whatever and we get some sleep. But that night, I wake up. My mom she'd been acting a little funny lately. Sometimes she didn't sleep well. And when she didn't sleep well, she would begin to rant on. But we start hearing some yelling. And I go downstairs and I see my mom being carted away in an ambulance. I remember her screaming, tied down. I've been in that situation myself too. But just like, who's chasing me? Leave me alone. I don't want to be here. My mom was screaming and I didn't know what was going on. But my brother and I, since we were maybe, I don't know, 2 blocks away from my house, but my dad must have been somewhere, we ended up in a group home for 2 weeks. And so I remember walking to my friend's house, just coming home from that. And as I knock on the door, hey, Jeff, you home? No one was really home, right? And I had been feeling a little crazy, but I remember this big giant tree that was always in front of his house. So I remember climbing this tree, and the whole time I'm really just thinking about, like, when I go to my home, there's these cockatiels, finches, parakeets, the little fucking shaggy dog, Benji, who got eaten by the neighbor's dog one time, right? But they're always in my house. My mom, she would tell me they were protection from the Santeros back home in Puerto Rico. But I'm pondering all these things because those parakeets are always biting each other and they're always eating each other, because she would put the lovebirds with the parakeets and I don't know what would happen, but it was like weird to see. And as I'm climbing, I'm just thinking about all this stuff, like what's going on with my mom, right? Like why is it that the things that we see or the things that she feels, I can't see or feel. But let me tell you, as life goes on, I know what that feels like too, right? And I remember getting to the top of this tree, and it must have been 30 or 40 feet. It was pretty high. And like I said, Milpitas is a very beautiful place. I was like a half a mile away from the foothills over off Calaveras, so I could see the whole city. But when you get to the top of those pine trees, they start to kind of swing, right? And boy, was I scared as shit. So I'm sitting up there for probably like 3 hours till the sun goes down. And I'm really just thinking about what's going on. And then my friend's mom comes home. Hey, what are you doing up there, Johnny? I don't know, I'm scared, man. You gotta get down, we're gonna get some help. No, I got it. But maybe it was just having someone else there that I was able to walk down and climb down. But when we get home, she goes and tells my parents that I had been climbing around in trees. Johnny, the hell you doing climbing in them trees, boy? There was nothing to do. Déjalo quieto. He's just a little kid. Don't yell at him. What? I'm trying to tell me to talk to him. Man, I just kind of walked away, right? But that was the beginning of this summer. My summers in Milpitas were pretty fun, right? We used to have these water balloon fights. And these water balloon fights would go from like 2 or 3 blocks of kids. And I remember towards the end of it, I run up to my brother because we had been running out of water balloons. And I'm like, hey, Javi, hey, I'm going to go with Danny and Jeff. We're going to go to the store and get some balloons, man. I got a few bucks from Mom earlier. Mom and Dad said to stay in the neighborhood, man. Just keep going with what we got. I'm going to go with the other Danny, and we're going to go down to Logs on the bikes. We'll be back in like an hour. We'll bring some stuff. So as I see him leave, I run up to Danny. Hey, man, you ready to go? Because we had never walked this far before, right? And it wasn't that far. But we walked to the store. As we're walking, talking about Saturday morning cartoons, comic books, X-Men, Wolverine was my favorite, right? We get to the store, and I remember me and Jeff kind of walk in, and we're talking about getting these, we used to have these water weenies. So one thing that we would do, not only would we have a bunch of water balloons, but they were kind of like water guns. It would be like the rubber hoses people would tie around to, later on I found out when they're hitting their shit, right? But, you put a cap on the end and you have a little nozzle at the front, and you have this big old thing of water you can keep on you so you can get those kids when you're going. And so we buy a couple of these things, but Danny kind of walked in a little slow. He kind of was like, oh, I'm going to go grab some candy. I'll meet you guys outside. So, as you know, we go pay. I think we paid a whopping like $5.45 for, 5 bags of water balloons and stuff. But we walk outside, and as Danny comes about 3 or 4 minutes later, he had been lingering. The clerk puts his hand on his shoulder. Hey, son, what do you got in your pockets? And I remember Danny looking up, and this look in his eyes, like he had been caught. But I didn't know what was going on at that time. Hell, I was too scared to steal anything. Of course, not till later, right? But, Danny was my Native American friend. And most of the times, they'd spend a lot of time on the reservation, but they did own a house right there on the block. That was the last time I saw Danny for about 2.5, 3 months. And he came back, he told us they had put him in juvenile hall. We were 7 years old. And this stuff, I couldn't really understand, right? But, it was really just another day. So one of the other things on my summer things that kind of helped me to understand that if I didn't have curiosity, or I didn't have adventure, or if I couldn't take a dare, I never felt alive, right? I had a hard time building relationships with my brothers. They were 4 or 5 years older than me, and I don't know, we grew up in the same house, but today we're completely different people. And so I remember they were terracing off these hills to build houses. And so it was like 3 hills terraced, and man, at the very bottom, we had built this ramp. Ninja Turtles was out, right? I think Ninja Turtles 2 had probably just came out, and you know, that was the in thing to do. So one of the kids, like the day before, I remember he had a broken arm because he fell off this ramp. And they're telling me, hey, get on the bike, get on the bike. And me and my brother had just built this BMX, right? I don't know how it was all chromey and shit. I don't know where they got it. But I remember I jump on this thing and I'm going, and I must have been going 25, 30 miles an hour. I really felt alive. When I hit that ramp at the bottom and I landed, I knew right there that feeling inside of me, that adrenaline, was something I craved, right? So I come home and my mom's in the kitchen. She's making some dinner. Hey, mijo, ¿qué está pasando contigo? Oh, you know, just nothing. We got school tomorrow. I hope you get the regular class again. We'll see. But it was hard for me to sleep. I remember this night, she told me this story. Some story about these 3 kings in Puerto Rico. I don't know. Ay, mijo, mi best friend when I was un chiquita lived across the street. Yeah? Yeah, but her brothers and friends always outside, like you guys, late into the night. Never sleeping, not listening to their parents. Pero los tres reyes, los 3 kings, they come. And she told me how that night she heard her friend outside and she had never saw her again. But as I'm sleeping, our house was a little bit off the block with the light and the shades coming through. There was always this light in the corner. Always this light in the corner that kept me up. I've always been a late owl, right? And so going to sleep before 1, 2 o'clock in the morning never came easy to me. But this night in particular, she had told me the story, and in the story, the 3 kings were on horses. But since I lived near the hills, right around midnight, all of a sudden I start hearing these horses neigh. Roar! Roar! Man, I could not get a lick of sleep that night. So I remember as I go to school, you know, I walk into a class, and this was my 2nd grade. Every year before that, between kindergarten and 2nd grade, I would be put into an ESL class. I would always walk in and they'd be like, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" And I'm like, "What the fuck? Okay." Right? But it would take 1 to 2 weeks before I'd get into a regular class. Now, maybe it's my undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't know until I was an adult. But school was always easy for me, except I never did homework, right? And no one ever really cared. So when the teachers would tell me things, I would catch on really quickly. But then I'd just fuck around and start making jokes, and they always accused me of cheating and everything else. So I never could find escape in school. And it's kind of those things, right? Not being able to, like being taken away from my family, really helped me not to be able to build those connections. My friends, and seeing some of these things of like jail at early ages when you don't quite understand. A lot of my friends that I mentioned, they're dead now. Some of them still in jail. Most of the people I grew up with share that same fate. But it's these kind of things that I can look back to and think about that this is where they come from, right? That I always tried to kind of go in the right ways, but when I looked at them, I never really quite understood what was going on. When I would get yelled at home and I just couldn't understand the reasons why, I took all that stuff and put it inside. So I remember a few years later, me and my mom, she started taking me to New York. And she would take me every other summer from that point on. But we took a bus, and we took the Greyhound from Hayward to the Bronx. And let me tell you, that was a fun ride. That was the first time I got to see this whole country and the beautiness of it, right? Denver, Colorado? Oh my God, have you guys been there? Great. But you're on the bus and you get to stop everywhere and get these, chips and candies and everything, right? But I remember I had met some girl on there, and she got on right around Colorado, and she got off in Chicago. And that whole in between, what is it, a bunch of fucking corn? So that was like the first time I ended up having sex was in the Popeyes bathroom around the corner from, at 12 years old, right? But it marked a change, because as I got to New York, I really got to see what family that stuck together was like. I'm not saying that my parents didn't love me or didn't make me feel loved. It's just that the mental health and the stress that happened at home, right? And all that stuff kind of kept me away from being able to build these connections. Because when I went there, the first thing my uncle's like, hey, what's up, man? Let's go listen to some salsa music and get some hot dogs and papaya, man. And so I remember him taking me down, and I get to see these tenement buildings with Puerto Rican flags hanging all over the windows and across the drapes. It gave me something that today I can do, right? Today I have that identity. And let me tell you, those hot dogs, okay, but the pizza, that's the stuff. The next thing we did was I went to go visit my grandma. And my grandma, I had never really met before. Yeah, I kind of heard her on the phone once or twice. And, my dad's mom had already passed. And so this was really like a time where I get to really meet my family. But, like I said, my parents went through a bunch of stuff too. Even to this day, let me tell you, if I go through, my dad lives in Texas now, so when we go through the Border Patrol crossings, he still remembers and still gives them shit, because in 1976, him and my mom crossed over into Mexico. He was taking some pictures, and when they brought it back, they stopped him, and they took the film out of his camera, and they said, you Mexicans get back across, right? And I always kind of find that funny, but it goes to say that they tried to raise me up as if I was something that I wasn't, right? Because for them to be an American meant something different than it was. But when I go visit my grandma, and we're walking up these tenement buildings, and she's on the 8th floor, she's like 85, and we're she's walking up really slow. The elevators, they don't work. We get upstairs, and we open the door. There's plastic on the couch. Grandma's got this little fro and her little colorful dress, black woman, and I'm like, huh? No one had thought to prepare me, right? Like my mother, she was very light skinned, very, very blonde and almost blue eyed, right? But it was one of those things that kind of taught me that we all kind of share the same history, right? So later on that night, I really didn't know. It's always in Spanish. It was always in Spanish. I don't know why these people didn't teach me Spanish, right? I don't know what's wrong with that. But I remember hearing a bunch of people going through outside the door. And it was like, oh, what's going on outside? Oh, let's go out there. And you hear steps and steps and steps. I mean, in these buildings must have been 500-600 people living in. And so we go outside, and there's a bunch of people, and we're walking, and we get down the steps. We get down the steps, and we go outside. And I remember looking up, and the sky was turning orange and green in the clouds. And it was something that brought a sense of wonder and curiosity to me, right? That was my first time seeing the Northern Lights, and it's kind of crazy that they're coming out now. But that always gave me the idea that if I just look deeper behind something, I can find a meaning. And it's that meaning that helped me find where I'm at today. So thank you.
Let's go take a bow. Go take a bow. Go take a bow. Yeah.